Who's he? You ever heard of this?
Yeah!
Look out!
Kids are still going to school here, and I guess he missed the... Hey, Lenny!
Hello? Is this a joke? I made my family disappear. This is my house. I have to defend it. This is it. Don't get scared now. Hello. Yes! Yes! Yes!
You're dead!
Mom?
Hey guys.
The story opens with the McAllister family getting ready to fly to Paris for Christmas. The night before the trip, everyone gathers at Peter and Kate McAllister's house in a quiet Chicago suburb, and the place is packed with relatives, noise, luggage, and holiday chaos. In the middle of all that madness is Kevin, Peter and Kate's youngest son, who seems to be everyone's favorite person to tease. His older siblings constantly pick on him, and even during dinner, Kevin cannot catch a break. Things get worse when his older brother Buzz starts messing with him and takes his food just to annoy him. Kevin finally snaps and goes after Buzz, but the whole situation spirals out of control. Plates, drinks, and food go everywhere, the dinner is ruined, and the family's Paris flight tickets get damaged in the mess. Kevin tries to explain that Buzz caused the problem first, but nobody wants to hear it. Instead, everyone just turns toward Kevin and looks at him like he is the only one to blame. Because of the disaster, Kevin is sent upstairs to sleep in the attic as punishment. Angry, embarrassed, and feeling completely unwanted, Kevin lashes out at his mother. In the heat of the moment, he tells her he wishes his whole family would just disappear. The house is full of people that night, including Kevin's older sister Linny, his brother Jeff, his oldest sister Megan, Uncle Frank, Peter's rude older brother, and several other relatives who are all staying over before the big trip. Later that night, powerful winds knock out a power line outside the house. The electricity goes out, and when it comes back, all the alarm clocks have been reset. Because of that, the entire family oversleeps. The next morning turns into total panic as everyone wakes up late and rushes around trying to get dressed, grab bags, and make it to the airport on time. In the middle of all that confusion, Kevin is completely forgotten upstairs in the attic. His oldest cousin Heather is responsible for counting the kids before they leave, but while she is counting, she accidentally mistakes a neighbor boy for Kevin. Since the final number seems correct, nobody questions it. The family locks up the house and hurries outside, fully believing that every child is with them. The neighbor kid, who was wrongly counted as Kevin, casually says goodbye and leaves. Still, nobody notices the mistake. The family piles into two separate airport vans, and Kate asks Heather if she counted everyone. Heather tells her there are 11 kids, including herself, so Kate assumes everything is fine. The vans speed off toward the airport, with everyone convinced they are already late. When the McAllisters arrive, they rush through the terminal, certain they have missed their flight, but the woman at the counter tells them they made it just in time. Relieved, the whole family boards the plane, finds their seats, and soon they are in the air, heading to Paris. Back at the house, Kevin finally wakes up. At first, he notices how strangely quiet everything is. He walks downstairs into the kitchen, turns on the television, and starts watching cartoons while enjoying the silence. But after a moment, he realizes something feels off. He calls out for his mother, then begins searching the house room by room. He even checks the basement, but no one is there. Once Kevin understands that he is completely alone, he remembers what he said the night before. In his mind, his wish actually worked. He believes he somehow made his family disappear. Instead of panicking, Kevin becomes thrilled. For the first time, there is nobody around to tell him what to do. He starts enjoying his freedom by doing things he is normally not allowed to do, like digging into Buzz's private stash and watching movies meant for adults. Meanwhile, on the plane, Kate suddenly feels uneasy. Something is bothering her, but she cannot figure out what it is. Peter tries to calm her down and reminds her that everything was handled before they left. But then the realization hits her all at once. She remembers Kevin. More specifically, she remembers that Kevin was left sleeping in the attic. Kate goes into shock, while the rest of the family tries to comfort her. At the same time, Kevin is having the time of his life back home. He is eating whatever he wants, watching what he wants, and enjoying the house as if it belongs entirely to him. A few hours later, the McAllister family lands in Paris, and as soon as they reach the airport, they rush toward the phones in a panic. Kate grabs a phone from a random woman and desperately tries to contact someone back in their neighborhood. Back in Chicago, two burglars named Marv and Harry are watching the homes in the area. They believe most families have gone away for Christmas, which means the houses should be empty and easy to rob. They park their van outside Kevin's house and begin trying to break in through the basement. Kevin notices their shadows moving near the window. Thinking quickly, he runs through the house and switches on as many lights as possible to make it look like people are inside. His plan works. When the burglars see the house light up, they assume someone is home and quickly run away. Afterward, Kevin hides under the bed, frightened by what just happened, but then he decides he is tired of being scared. Since he is alone, he tells himself he has to act like the man of the house now. Filled with sudden courage, he runs outside and loudly announces that he is not afraid anymore. That confidence does not last long. Just as Kevin is feeling brave, he is startled by his neighbor, Old Man Marley. Kevin has heard terrifying rumors about Marley, including the story that he murdered his own family years earlier in 1958. The sight of him sends Kevin racing back into the house, where he hides behind some bedsheets in fear. Meanwhile, in Paris, Kate finally manages to contact the police and explains that her young son has been left home alone. The police send an officer to check the house, but when the officer arrives, Kevin thinks it might be one of the burglars returning, so he hides and refuses to answer. The officer assumes nobody is home and leaves without looking any further. At the airport, the McAllisters learn that every flight back home for the next 2 days is fully booked. The whole family begins to panic again. An airport employee tells them they can wait there in case a seat becomes available. So they decide Kate will stay behind at the airport and keep trying to get back to Chicago, while Peter takes the rest of the family to his brother's apartment in Paris. Back at home, Kevin begins taking care of himself like an adult. He showers, fixes his hair, and tries using aftershave, but the moment it touches his face, he instantly regrets it. After getting himself ready, Kevin spots a box perched high on a shelf in Buzz's room. He stretches to grab it, but the shelf collapses under the effort, sending him tumbling to the floor. Brushing himself off, he grabs some cash from the fallen box, not realizing that in doing so he's freed his brother's tarantula. Feeling excited about having a little spending money, Kevin heads out to the local market to pick up a toothbrush. Inside the store, Kevin freezes when he notices a menacing neighbor with a bloody hand. Terrified, he bolts out of the shop before buying anything. The store clerk sees him flee and quickly calls the police, claiming the boy has stolen a toothbrush. An officer immediately takes off in pursuit, trying to catch Kevin. Thinking fast, Kevin darts to an ice skating rink. The officer slips and falls on the ice while Kevin glides effortlessly across the surface, managing to escape yet again. Meanwhile, Marvin and Harry are in the middle of robbing a house, loading their loot into a van. Their bickering grows heated, resembling a quarrel between an old married couple, and at one point, they nearly hit Kevin with their car as he makes his way home. Kevin notices them tailing him, and he quickly runs toward a nearby church. The thieves assume he went inside and leave, but Kevin is actually cleverly hiding, pretending to be one of the church's statues outside. That night, the burglars return to Kevin's house, convinced the McAllisters are still away on vacation. What they don't realize is that Kevin has been moving mannequins and other objects around the house to simulate activity, making it appear fully occupied. Seeing the house alive, the robbers panic and retreat. Kevin grins, knowing he has outsmarted them once more. Back in Paris, Kate frantically tries to get back to her son. She pleads with passengers to sell their tickets, offering $500 per Rolex, a ring, and even first-class tickets for a later flight. Finally, a woman accepts, allowing Kate to catch the earliest available flight to the U.S., though it only gets her as far as Scranton, Pennsylvania. Shocked to learn that all flights to Chicago are booked, she explains her dilemma to an airport employee who can only offer her a hotel. Suddenly, a man named Gus Polinski approaches her, introducing himself along with his musical band. He's heard about her situation and offers her a ride to Chicago since they're heading that way anyway. Kate gratefully accepts, relieved at the thought of being reunited with Kevin. Meanwhile, back home, Kevin continues his day. He shops for basic necessities, takes a walk, and even washes the dishes. The burglars return, attempting another break-in. Kevin quickly turns on a movie, and as a character begins shooting, he sets off firecrackers, making Marv believe the house is fully occupied. Marv rushes out in panic, relaying what he heard to Harry, who is skeptical. Harry is convinced Kevin is home alone, so they wait and plan their next move. Later, Kevin leaves the house to pick out a Christmas tree. While decorating, he notices Harry watching from a small window, confirming that Kevin is indeed alone. They agree to return that night at 9 o'clock, unaware that Kevin overheard everything. Kevin decides to seize a magical opportunity and tries to catch Santa Claus. A woman informs him that Santa is just heading out to his sleigh, so Kevin rushes to catch up. Santa, grumbling about parking tickets and tossing a cigarette, listens as Kevin explains that he doesn't want presents this year. Instead, Kevin wishes for his family to come back. Santa nods and promises to do what he can before pulling away in his sleigh. On his way home, Kevin pauses at a random house, watching a joyful family celebrating together. The sight makes him feel a mix of longing and loneliness. Seeking comfort, he heads to church and sits quietly, listening to the choir. To his surprise, the scary neighbor appears next to him, wishing him happy holidays and mentioning that he came to see his granddaughter sing. As they talk, Kevin realizes the neighbor isn't frightening at all. They discuss family struggles, and the old man offers Kevin some heartfelt advice that inspires him. Returning home, Kevin is determined to protect his house. He hatches an elaborate plan, setting up clever traps, toys scattered on the floor, water on the stairs, hot metal on the door handle, and nails strategically placed on the ground. With everything prepared, Kevin braces himself, ready to defend his home against the returning intruders. Kevin does not stop at just setting traps. He also thinks ahead and prepares a way to escape if things go wrong. Later that evening, while he is sitting down for dinner, the two burglars finally arrive outside the house. Kevin hears them approaching and quietly gets into position behind the door, holding an air rifle and waiting for the right moment. When Harry tries to get in first, Kevin slips the barrel of the rifle through the pet door and shoots him right in the leg. Harry jumps back in pain, completely confused about what just hit him. Then Marv bends down and sticks his head through the same little door to check what happened. Kevin is already waiting for him and fires again, hitting Marv directly in the forehead. Now both burglars are hurt, angry, and even more determined to find another way inside. Harry heads around to the back door, but Kevin has already turned that area into a trap by pouring water outside earlier. The moment Harry steps there, he slips hard on the ice and crashes to the ground. At the same time, Marv tries his luck at the basement entrance, but things go even worse for him. After struggling for a bit, he finally manages to break in using his crowbar and wanders through the dark basement. Wanting to turn on the lights, he pulls what he thinks is a light cord, but it is actually connected to an iron. The heavy iron drops from above and lands straight on his head. Meanwhile, Harry finally makes it to the back door, but when he grabs the doorknob, he realizes Kevin has heated it until it is burning hot. Harry badly burns his hand and immediately rushes back outside, shoving it into the snow to cool it down. Marv, meanwhile, has lost both his shoes and socks while trying to get out of the basement. As he moves up the stairs, he does not notice that Kevin has placed glue on the steps. Then, with his bare foot, Marv steps directly onto a nail. The pain sends him falling backward as he screams in agony. Still refusing to give up, Harry returns to the front entrance. This time, he carefully touches the handle first and sees that it seems safe. He opens the door and steps inside, thinking he has finally beaten Kevin's tricks. But the second he crosses the doorway, he triggers another trap. A burst of fire shoots out and scorches the top of his head. Panicking, Harry runs outside again and buries his burning head in the snow to put out the flames. At the same time, Marv grabs his crowbar and tries to make his way back out, hoping to find a less painful way into the house. Harry, now furious and badly injured, charges at the door and forces his way inside. He hears Kevin somewhere in the house and quickly heads toward the sound, but Kevin has another surprise waiting. Harry triggers a trap that slaps a glue-covered sheet onto his face, and then a fan blasts feathers all over him, leaving him looking ridiculous. Marv finally gets in through a window, but the moment he lands, he steps on a sharp glass ornament. Now he can barely walk. He runs into Harry, and Harry immediately asks why Marv looks so terrible. Marv looks back at him and asks why Harry is dressed like a chicken. Before they can argue for long, Kevin calls out to them, daring them to come and catch him. The two thieves charge after him, but Kevin has scattered toy cars across the floor. They both slip and crash down. They scramble back up and keep chasing him, but Kevin is waiting with paint cans hanging from above. As they rush forward, he swings the cans and knocks both men down hard. Then Kevin retreats to his parents' bedroom and calls the police, calmly reporting a robbery at the house. After making the call, Kevin tries to escape, but Marv suddenly lunges and grabs his leg. Thinking quickly, Kevin spots Buzz's tarantula nearby. He grabs the spider and places it right on Marv's face. Marv immediately lets go and starts screaming in panic. The spider then crawls onto Harry, making things even worse. Marv tries to kill it with his crowbar, but instead of hitting the spider, he smacks Harry and hurts him even more. Kevin uses his planned escape route and slides across a zip line to reach his treehouse. Marv and Harry refuse to quit, so they grab the rope and try to follow him. But when they are halfway across, Kevin cuts the rope. Both burglars swing backward and slam violently into the side of the house. Kevin climbs down and runs toward the neighbor's house, the same place the burglars had robbed earlier. He slips into the basement and tries to make his way through, but when he opens the door, Marv and Harry are already there waiting for him. They grab Kevin and hang him up like a piece of clothing, trying to decide what they should do to him. Just when things look dangerous, Old Man Marley appears. He steps in and knocks both burglars unconscious, saving Kevin at the perfect moment. Marley brings Kevin to safety as the police arrive. The officers arrest Harry and Marv, finally ending their night of disaster. As the police take the burglars away, Kevin smiles and gives them a little wave. The next morning, Kevin wakes up and sees snow falling outside. For a moment, he gets excited and starts calling for his mother, but then he remembers that he is still alone. He sits quietly and looks at a photo of his family, clearly missing them now more than ever. Suddenly, Kate walks into the house and calls out for him. Kevin rushes downstairs and runs straight into his mother's arms. A few minutes later, the rest of the family arrives as well. Peter is deeply relieved to see that Kevin is safe and unharmed. Even Buzz gives him some credit, saying he is impressed that Kevin managed not to burn the house down. Later, Kevin looks out the window and sees Old Man Marley outside, happily reunited with his own family. It is a quiet, emotional moment, and Kevin smiles as he watches him. But that peace does not last long. From upstairs, Buzz suddenly screams, asking Kevin what he did to his room. Alright, so let's talk about the story itself, the thing that honestly makes Home Alone stick in your brain for decades. Picture this: an 8-year-old kid, Kevin McAllister, wakes up one chaotic morning to find everyone gone. His huge family, 15 people strong, has jetted off to Paris for Christmas, and somehow, they've forgotten him. Now, this is where the movie starts doing its magic. You can't help but think, there's no way this would ever happen in real life, and you're right, it's completely ridiculous. But that's the point. The movie doesn't want realism. It wants fun, chaos, and just the tiniest pinch of kid fantasy. Kevin doesn't just sit around whining about being alone. No, he immediately starts taking over the house like it's his own kingdom. He's got snacks, movies, his own schedule, basically every kid's dream, until the real challenge shows up. Enter the wet bandits Harry and Marv, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. These guys are the worst possible burglars to mess with Kevin's newfound freedom, and the story shifts into a hilarious battle of wits, traps, and pure cartoonish ingenuity. What's interesting is that it's not just a series of gags glued together. There's a rhythm to it. You've got Kevin enjoying his solo freedom, exploring the house, pretending he's invisible, all the while the burglars are lurking outside, completely underestimating him. The tension builds, but it's tension in a very playful, almost mischievous way. The movie keeps the story moving with little subplots that give it life: sibling rivalries, the quirky neighbor across the street, even Kevin's small moments of reflection about his family. And the beauty of it, even in the chaos, there's a heart beating through it. You can feel that Kevin isn't just setting traps for fun, he's defending his home, his little slice of normalcy, against these invaders. It's a clever little setup that makes all the absurdity somehow believable and totally satisfying. Honestly, the story is simple, maybe even a bit silly, but it's that simplicity that makes it perfect. Kids get the fun, adults can enjoy the chaos, and everyone can appreciate the heart buried under the traps and explosions of paint cans. It's pure, mischievous holiday fun wrapped in suburban absurdity, and it's exactly what makes Home Alone so endlessly rewatchable. Now here's the thing about Home Alone that everybody eventually realizes once they grow up and watch it again. This movie makes absolutely no sense, like at all, and somehow, that weirdly becomes part of the charm. Because think about it for even 30 seconds. An entire family forgets an 8-year-old child, not just for 5 minutes. They make it through the airport, onto the plane, halfway across the Atlantic, and then suddenly somebody goes, "Wait, Kevin," it's insane. There's no universe where that actually happens, especially with a family that big. Somebody would notice. A sibling, an aunt, literally anyone, but the movie does something smart. It throws so much chaos at you early on that your brain almost stops questioning it. Everybody's yelling over each other, the power goes out, alarms don't work, kids are running everywhere, pizza boxes all over the kitchen, vans honking outside. It creates this giant cloud of panic where you kinda go, all right, maybe, not believable exactly. Just believable enough for a Christmas comedy. And honestly, once the movie gets rolling, you stop caring. That's the real trick of Home Alone. It understands that the emotional logic matters more than the real-world logic. The movie isn't asking you to analyze it like a crime investigation. It's asking you to tap into that childhood fantasy of what if I had the whole house to myself. And once you buy into that idea, the rest sort of falls into place. Well, mostly, because then Kevin turns into a tiny suburban war criminal. The traps are where the movie completely abandons reality and just embraces cartoon logic. This kid somehow engineers a full-scale defense system overnight using paint cans, blowtorches, tar, nails, ice, ropes, broken ornaments. At one point, the house basically becomes a live-action Looney Tunes episode. And Harry and Marv survive injuries that honestly would hospitalize a normal human being for months. Joe Pesci gets his head burned with a blowtorch and just keeps going. Daniel Stern steps on a nail, gets electrocuted, smashes his face repeatedly, slips down icy stairs like 15 times, and somehow they're both still functioning. Barely, but still functioning. And that's where people either fully accept the movie or completely reject it. Some viewers love the exaggerated slapstick because it feels like classic cartoon comedy. It's Three Stooges chaos with Christmas decorations. The pain is so over the top that it stops feeling realistic and just becomes part of the rhythm of the joke. But other people watch this movie and genuinely hate it because the violence feels weirdly intense for a family film. I actually get both sides, honestly, especially watching it as an adult. As a kid, you're laughing because, haha, burglar got hit with paint can. As an adult, part of your brain is calculating the medical bills. But weirdly, even the ridiculous stuff works because the movie commits to it so confidently. There's never a moment where Home Alone winks at the audience or apologizes for being silly. it just keeps escalating. Every trap is bigger, louder, dumber, and somehow funnier than the last one. And honestly, I think if the movie tried to be realistic, it probably wouldn't be remembered at all. The absurdity is the identity. That's why people still debate it decades later. Some viewers can't get past the impossible premise or the cartoon violence. Others embrace it completely because the movie understands something important. Christmas movies aren't really built on realism anyway. They're built on feeling. And Home Alone absolutely knows how to make people feel like kids again, even when the logic completely falls apart. Kevin McAllister is honestly one of the weirdest movie protagonists when you really stop and think about it. Because depending on who's watching Home Alone, he's either this lovable little icon of childhood independence or an absolute menace to society. And the funny thing is, both interpretations kind of work. When the movie starts, Kevin isn't written like some sweet, perfect movie kid that everybody instantly adores. He's loud, impatient, sarcastic, dramatic. Honestly, he acts exactly like an overwhelmed 8-year-old stuck inside a house full of relatives during Christmas chaos. He complains constantly, fights with his siblings, throws little tantrums, says things he probably shouldn't say to his mom. There's a reason half his family looks exhausted around him. But I actually think that's why the character feels real. A lot of family movies try too hard to make the child lead innocent and adorable every second they're on screen. Kevin gets to be messy. Sometimes he's funny. Sometimes he's irritating. Sometimes he's genuinely selfish. And then 5 minutes later, the movie reminds you he's still just a little kid trying to make sense of everything around him. The first stretch of the movie really captures that emotional whiplash kids go through. 1 second, Kevin wants his entire family gone forever because everybody's yelling at him. Then suddenly, he wakes up alone and gets exactly what he wished for. At first, it feels amazing. No rules, no adults, junk food everywhere, jumping on beds, watching gangster movies he definitely shouldn't be watching. It's basically a child's dream version of freedom, and Macaulay Culkin sells that excitement perfectly. There's this confidence Kevin slowly develops where he starts treating the house like it's his kingdom now. The grocery shopping scene, the fake party setup with the mannequins, talking back to adults over the phone, it's all got this energy where he's pretending to be more grown-up than he really is. But underneath all that confidence, there's still fear there. That's the part I think people overlook sometimes. Kevin acts brave because he has to. He's scared of the basement furnace. He's scared of the neighbor. He's scared of being alone at night. The movie keeps quietly reminding you that no matter how clever he becomes, he's still a kid improvising his way through everything. And honestly, that vulnerability is probably why audiences connected with him so strongly. Now, obviously, there are people who absolutely cannot stand Kevin, and I get it. Watching the movie as an adult, there are definitely moments where he comes off bratty or weirdly cruel, especially during the trap scenes. This child basically transforms into a tiny tactical engineer, fueled entirely by sugar and vengeance. Some viewers see him as resourceful and hilarious. Other viewers look at him setting up flaming doorknobs and swinging paint cans and think, this child needs supervision immediately. The movie kind of walks this strange line, where Kevin is both innocent and slightly unhinged at the same time. But that's also what makes him memorable. He's not just cute movie kid number 4. He has personality. He overreacts, he lies, he panics, he gets cocky, he gets lonely. He feels believable emotionally, even when the situations around him become completely ridiculous. And by the end of the movie, Kevin's actually changed a little, not in some giant dramatic Hollywood speech kind of way. Just subtly, he appreciates his family more. He matures a bit. He realizes independence sounds more exciting than it actually feels. That emotional shift is small, but it gives the movie more heart than people sometimes expect from a comedy built around cartoon violence. Honestly, I think Kevin became such an iconic character because he taps into something universal. Every kid wanted his freedom. Every adult remembers wanting that freedom. And somewhere in the middle of all the chaos, traps, screaming burglars, and Christmas music, Kevin McAllister somehow became this symbol of childhood imagination mixed with complete suburban insanity. And somehow it still works. You know what's actually kind of crazy about Home Alone? The entire movie basically lives or dies on Macaulay Culkin working. There's really no way around that. If Kevin isn't believable, charming, funny, or engaging enough to carry huge stretches of the movie completely alone, the whole thing falls apart fast. And somehow this kid just absolutely nails it. Watching it now, it's easy to forget how difficult this role actually is. Culkin isn't just reacting to adults the whole movie like most child actors back then. He has to carry scenes by himself for long periods of time, talking to himself, reacting to empty rooms, building tension, making silent visual jokes work. That's not easy even for experienced adult actors, honestly. But Culkin has this weird natural rhythm on screen where nothing feels forced. His expressions alone basically became part of pop culture forever. The aftershave scream, the shocked face, the little smirks when Kevin thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Half the movie works because Culkin understood exactly how expressive Kevin needed to be without turning him into a cartoon. And the thing is, he's genuinely funny. Not cute kid funny, actually funny. There's a big difference. Some child performances age terribly because they rely entirely on audiences going, "Oh, look at the adorable kid." Culkin's performance still works because his comedic timing is sharp. The pauses, the reactions, the confidence when Kevin starts pretending to be an adult, it all feels weirdly natural. Even tiny moments like him grocery shopping or trying to act tough over the phone become memorable because of how he plays them. At the same time, though, I totally understand why some people find him annoying. There are definitely moments where Kevin comes off smug or overly cocky. Culkin leans into that energy intentionally, too. Kevin isn't written as some innocent, angelic child. He rolls his eyes, talks back, gets frustrated, makes dramatic faces constantly. Depending on your tolerance level for precocious kid characters, he either becomes lovable or unbearable within the first 20 minutes. And honestly, that tension kind of helps the performance, because Kevin feels like an actual child instead of a sanitized movie version of one. What impresses me most watching the film again is how Culkin balances confidence and vulnerability almost scene by scene. One minute Kevin is setting traps like a miniature military strategist, then suddenly he's terrified of the furnace in the basement or quietly realizing he misses his mom. Those emotional switches never feel unnatural. Culkin somehow makes the exaggerated comedy and the more sincere emotional moments exist in the same movie without it feeling awkward. That's hard to pull off, especially in a movie this ridiculous. And you can really see why this performance exploded the way it did back in 1990. Home Alone didn't just make Macaulay Culkin famous, it basically turned him into the face of childhood for an entire generation. Even people who haven't watched the movie in years still instantly recognize Kevin McAllister. The pajamas, the scream, the mischievous grin, it's burned into pop culture permanently. What's interesting is that a lot of people still argue the sequels prove how important Culkin specifically was to the franchise. Once you remove him, the formula never quite feels the same again. Because it wasn't just the traps or the Christmas setting people connected to, it was Kevin himself, or more specifically, the way Culkin played him. And honestly, when you look at how many child actors struggle to carry even simple scenes convincingly, Culkin's performance here becomes even more impressive over time. The movie asks him to be funny, emotional, sarcastic, frightened, confident, lonely, clever, chaotic, and heartfelt, sometimes all within the same 10-minute stretch. And somehow he keeps the whole thing grounded just enough for audiences to stay emotionally invested, even while grown men are being hit in the face with paint cans. That's a very specific talent. And without it, I genuinely don't think Home Alone becomes the classic people still revisit every Christmas. One thing Home Alone really gets right, and I honestly didn't appreciate this enough as a kid, is how strong the supporting cast is. Because yeah, Macaulay Culkin is the center of the movie, obviously, but the film would not feel nearly as alive without all these weird, memorable personalities bouncing around him. And we have to start with Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern because, come on, these two completely understand the assignment. Harry and Marv could have easily been generic bad guy burglars, but Pesci and Stern turn them into this chaotic comedy duo that basically carries the entire second half of the movie. Their chemistry is incredible because they play off each other so naturally. Pesci is all frustration and simmering anger, constantly looking like he's one bad day away from exploding, while Stern plays Marv like this giant clueless cartoon character, stumbling through life one terrible decision at a time. And somehow that combination never gets old. Honestly, Daniel Stern might secretly be the MVP of the movie. The screams, the facial expressions, the physical commitment, this man throws himself into every single gag like his life depends on it. The scene where he steps on the nail still makes people physically recoil, even when you know it's coming. And Pesci's reactions are just as funny because you can feel him trying so hard not to completely lose his mind every 5 seconds. What's wild is how family-friendly Pesci somehow feels here, considering this released right after Goodfellas. It's like watching somebody try to contain pure gangster energy inside a PG Christmas movie. You can almost see the censored swearing happening in his brain during half these scenes. But outside of the burglars, the movie quietly builds a really solid supporting lineup. Catherine O'Hara especially gives the movie way more emotional grounding than people sometimes acknowledge. It would have been easy to play Kevin's mother as just hysterical for 2 hours, but O'Hara gives her real panic and guilt underneath all the comedy. Some of the funniest moments involving the family chaos work because she feels believable as this exhausted mom trying to hold together an impossible situation. And honestly, the airplane realization scene still works. That sudden Kevin panic hits immediately because O'Hara sells it so hard. Then there's Robert's Blossom as Old Man Marley, who honestly could have felt super cheesy in another version of this movie. The whole creepy neighbor who turns out misunderstood storyline is very simple, very sentimental, but Blossom plays it with this quiet sadness that makes it land emotionally anyway. His scenes with Kevin slow the movie down in a good way. Suddenly, the film stops being just about traps and chaos for a minute and actually becomes kind of thoughtful. Also, John Candy showing up for what's basically an extended cameo somehow leaves a huge impression anyway. That's just John Candy magic. He walks into movies for 10 minutes and immediately makes everything warmer and funnier. His polka band stories feel weirdly improvised too, which honestly makes the scenes even better because they have this loose, natural energy compared to the more tightly structured comedy everywhere else. And even the smaller family members stick in your memory, Buzz being an absolute menace to society, the chaotic cousins running around everywhere, Uncle Frank being weirdly rude for no reason. The movie fills the McAllister house with just enough personality that the opening chaos actually feels believable. That's important because the family dynamic is what gives Kevin's loneliness meaning later on. If the house felt empty emotionally from the start, the movie wouldn't work nearly as well once Kevin's alone. What I really like is that nobody in the movie feels like they wandered in from a completely different film. Even with all the exaggerated comedy, everybody exists in the same slightly heightened Christmas universe. The burglars are cartoonish, the family is chaotic, Marley is emotional, Kevin is mischievous, but somehow it all blends together naturally. And honestly, that's harder to pull off than people think, because Home Alone isn't just remembered for Kevin's screaming aftershave into the mirror. It's remembered because every character, even the smaller ones, adds some little flavor or energy that keeps the movie feeling alive 30 years later. Okay, let's talk about the humor in Home Alone, because honestly, this is the part that has cemented the movie in everyone's mind for decades. The comedy is outrageous, messy, and sometimes downright sadistic, and that's exactly why it works. The slapstick is off the charts. Kevin turning his house into a booby-trapped fortress is pure cartoon logic. Paint cans swinging, hot doorknobs, marbles on the floor, tar on the steps. It's like watching a live-action Looney Tunes short. And yet somehow it's grounded just enough that you buy into it. The timing is perfect. You're laughing, cringing, and gasping all at once. Pesci and Stern are incredible here. Their reactions to every injury are priceless, and they sell the pain with a level of commitment that makes the chaos feel real, even when it's completely absurd. It's the kind of comedy where the setup is as fun as the punchline. Kevin's cleverness, using ordinary household objects in insane ways, is endlessly entertaining. And because the movie never winks at the audience or apologizes for being ridiculous, the stakes feel high in a hilarious way. You're genuinely invested in whether he'll succeed, even as your brain is screaming, no human being survives this. Then there's the subtle stuff, the little jokes peppered throughout. The "keep the change, you filthy animal" scene is iconic, and the way Kevin uses clips from old gangster movies to scare people is just brilliant. The humor isn't one note. It's a mix of clever gags, sight gags, and pure physical comedy. It's messy, it's loud, and sometimes it's painful to watch, and that's what makes it memorable. But here's the thing, the comedy is only half the story. It's wrapped in holiday spirit and warmth, which keeps it from feeling cruel. You can laugh at the burglars getting their faces burned or slipping on ice because, underneath all the slapstick, there's a sense that Kevin is standing up for himself. It's cathartic, chaotic, and somehow heartwarming all at once. In the end, the humor of Home Alone isn't just in the traps or the screams. It's in the timing, the character's commitment, and the way the movie turns impossible situations into an unforgettable comedy playground. 30 years later, it still makes people laugh, some of us a little nervously, but laugh nonetheless. And honestly, I don't think any other movie quite captures that chaotic, mischievous, perfectly timed slapstick spirit quite like this one. Alright, now we need to talk about something that always comes up when people rewatch Home Alone as adults, the violence. And I mean, let's be real, it's kind of nuts. I mean, this is a PG movie, right? But Kevin basically turns his house into a death trap for two grown men. Paint cans swinging from the stairs, hot doorknobs, tar on the floor, blowtorches, you name it. The wet bandits go through more injuries than a slapstick stunt reel could handle. The thing is, the movie treats it all like it's hilarious. Every thump, scream, or charred head is played for laughs, and the actors commit 100% to it. Stern and Pesci are in full-on cartoon mode, and that's what makes it work for some viewers. It's over the top and ridiculous, so your brain kind of says, okay, this isn't real, it's just comedy. But then there's the other side. Some people watch this and can't get past how brutal it actually looks, even if it's exaggerated. You can almost feel the pain, and you start thinking, wait a second, this kid is torturing these burglars. For adults, it can be a little unnerving, especially when you remember it's technically a film aimed at families. There's a strange tension between laughing at the ingenuity of Kevin's traps and feeling a tiny pang of horror at the level of carnage he's inflicting. And that's really where the controversy lives. The movie asks you to accept extreme cartoon violence as funny. If you buy into that, it's pure chaos comedy gold. If you can't, it becomes uncomfortable and maybe even a little disturbing. It's weird because the line is so thin. The difference between funny and painful is basically just how willing you are to suspend disbelief. Personally, I think the movie knows exactly what it's doing. It leans hard into the slapstick, it commits fully, and that makes the violence feel playful instead of realistic. But yeah, it's still one of those things where you have to squint a little and remind yourself. Kevin isn't really hurting anyone. He's just a mischievous 8-year-old making the most of his weird, absurd situation. At the end of the day, the violence is part of the signature chaos of Home Alone, and it's exactly why people either love it or can't stand it. And honestly, that debate is part of what keeps the movie alive 30 years later. What honestly surprised me rewatching Home Alone as an adult is how emotional the movie actually is underneath all the screaming, slipping, and paint-can violence. Because people mostly remember the traps, obviously, but the reason the movie lasts isn't just because Harry gets hit in the face with an iron. It's because there's a real warmth running quietly underneath all the chaos. Kevin starts the movie angry at his family, and honestly, you kind of understand why. The house is overcrowded, nobody's listening to him, his older brother is bullying him nonstop, Uncle Frank is, well, Uncle Frank. The entire opening feels loud and stressful in a very believable family way. Kevin says he wishes his family would disappear, but it feels less like genuine hatred and more like a frustrated kid lashing out because he feels ignored. Then suddenly he wakes up alone and gets exactly what he wanted. At first, it's exciting. Honestly, those scenes are still weirdly satisfying to watch. Eating junk food, jumping on beds, watching movies you're not supposed to watch, wandering around the house with no adults telling you what to do, the movie taps directly into that childhood fantasy of freedom. But after a while, the excitement fades and the loneliness slowly creeps in. And that's where the movie gets smarter than people give it credit for. Kevin doesn't dramatically break down crying every 5 minutes or give some huge emotional speech. The loneliness shows up in smaller moments, quiet moments, him eating dinner alone, him realizing nobody's coming home yet, him getting scared at night. You slowly start seeing that all the freedom in the world doesn't really replace having people around who care about you. At the same time, the movie keeps cutting back to Catherine O'Hara's character desperately trying to get back home, and honestly, she gives the movie a lot of its emotional weight. Her panic never feels fake. There's this genuine guilt in her performance where you can feel how badly she wants to fix this impossible mistake. The scene on the plane, where she suddenly realizes Kevin's missing, still works because it feels so immediate and raw. But the emotional core that really sneaks up on people is the old man Marley storyline. As a kid, I mostly saw him as the creepy guy with the shovel, but rewatching it now, that subplot is kind of beautiful in its simplicity. Kevin spends most of the movie afraid of him because of rumors and exaggerated neighborhood stories, only to eventually realize Marley is just lonely. That church conversation between them is honestly one of the best scenes in the entire film because it suddenly strips away all the comedy and lets the movie breathe for a minute. Two lonely people sitting quietly and talking during Christmas. That's it. No giant emotional manipulation. No dramatic soundtrack swelling every 2 seconds. Just sincerity. And the payoff at the end, when Marley reconnects with his family while Kevin watches from the window, still lands emotionally because the movie earned it. It reminds you that Home Alone isn't really about a kid torturing burglars for 2 hours. It's about connection, about missing people, about realizing family can drive you insane and still be the thing you need most. Even the sentimentality, which honestly should feel cheesy sometimes, somehow works because the movie feels genuinely earnest. It's not trying to be edgy or cynical. It fully embraces warmth and holiday emotion without apologizing for it. And maybe that's why the movie survives generation after generation. Because underneath all the cartoon chaos and slapstick madness, there's this really human little story about loneliness, fear, family, and wanting to feel loved during Christmas. And no matter how old the movie gets, those feelings don't really age. Let's talk about the Christmas vibe, because honestly, it's one of the reasons Home Alone has stuck around for decades. The movie doesn't just happen at Christmas, it feels like Christmas in every frame. The lights, the trees, the snow falling outside the McAllister house, the chaos of a massive family trying to get out the door, it all instantly wraps you in this warm, festive feeling, even if you're not in the mood for it. There's something comforting about the way the movie frames suburban Chicago in winter. Every shot is carefully designed to feel cozy and familiar, from the glow of the living room, lamps to the way snow crunches underfoot as Kevin races around outside. And John Williams' score just nails it. You hear those familiar holiday notes, and it's like a blanket for your brain. Even the little musical cues in the trap sequences, chaotic as they are, feel festive in a strange, mischievous way. It's also about that emotional memory the movie conjures. Watching Kevin scramble through the house, you can't help but remember your own childhood fantasies, running around with total freedom, sneaking snacks, and imagining yourself as a genius engineer laying traps everywhere. There's a particular kind of nostalgia baked into those scenes that hits even harder if you've seen the movie a dozen times over the years. And it's not just about snow and music. The film is infused with holiday chaos in a way that feels alive. The big family, the neighbors, the frantic airport, the little touches like Kevin watching his gangster movies while sipping chocolate. All of it makes the setting feel vibrant, lived in, and unmistakably festive. Even when the traps start flying and the chaos ramps up, there's still this sense of warmth. You never feel like it's purely violent or mean-spirited. There's humor, heart, and just enough Christmas magic to remind you why this has become a staple for holiday viewing. It's like the movie itself is a little holiday ritual. The lights, the snow, the music, the laughter, it all combines to make Home Alone feel like the holiday season in cinematic form. In the end, it's that holiday spirit, the combination of visuals, music, and emotional warmth that keeps audiences coming back year after year. You watch it, you laugh, you cringe a little at the traps, and then you feel that glow, the kind that makes Christmas movies feel timeless. Home Alone isn't just a comedy, it's Christmas bottled up and delivered straight to your living room. The thing with Home Alone is that it looks simple from the outside. Kid gets forgotten, burglars show up, kid destroys burglars, roll credits. But when you actually sit with the movie, you realize the reason it works is because Chris Columbus and John Hughes build that simplicity with a lot more care than people usually remember. John Hughes' script is doing a surprising amount of heavy lifting early on. The opening isn't just random family noise, even though it feels like total chaos. Everybody's talking over each other, kids are running around, pizza is getting fought over, adults are stressed, and Kevin is slowly being pushed further and further into frustration. It feels messy, but it's controlled mess. Every little piece is there to make the impossible setup feel just believable enough. That's really the smart part. The movie knows leaving Kevin behind is absurd, so it spends time stacking excuses. The power goes out, the alarms fail, everyone oversleeps, the family panics, the neighbor kid gets counted by mistake, the airport rush becomes so frantic that the audience almost doesn't have time to question it. You don't fully believe it, but you believe the emotion of it, and for this kind of movie, that's enough. Chris Columbus directs it with that same balance. He doesn't treat the story like a parody, but he also doesn't make it too serious. The tone stays right in this strange, sweet spot between family warmth, cartoon violence, and holiday chaos. That's not easy. One wrong move and the movie becomes too sentimental. Another wrong move and it becomes too cruel. Somehow, most of the time, it lands right in the middle. And the setup-payoff writing is honestly one of the film's biggest strengths. The gangster movie clips, Kevin's fear of the furnace, the rumors about Old Man Marley, the family conflict, the burglars casing the neighborhood. All these little details get planted early, and later they come back in funny or emotional ways. That's why the movie feels more satisfying than just a random collection of slapstick scenes. The traps are memorable, sure, but the film earns its final act by building toward it piece by piece. Hughes also understands childhood frustration really well. Kevin's anger toward his family is exaggerated, but it comes from a place kids understand immediately. Feeling ignored, feeling picked on, feeling like nobody takes you seriously. That emotional starting point gives the story a little more weight than it probably should have on paper, but the writing isn't flawless. Some parts are definitely conventional. The misunderstood neighbor subplot is familiar. The family lesson is not exactly subtle. The story goes exactly where you expect it to go. And yes, some jokes get pushed a bit too far, especially when the film repeats certain gags that probably only needed to happen once. Still, the craftsmanship is stronger than the premise sounds. That's what makes Home Alone interesting. It's not a complicated film, but it's extremely well assembled. Columbus gives it warmth and polish. Hughes gives it structure, jokes, and emotional rhythm. Together, they turn what could have been a disposable kids' comedy into something that feels oddly complete, funny, ridiculous, sentimental, violent, cozy, and somehow totally coherent. And that's probably why people keep coming back to it. Not because the story is realistic, not because every joke is perfect, but because the movie knows exactly how to set up chaos, deliver the laugh, and then sneak in just enough heart before you realize you actually care. One thing I never really appreciated as a kid, because I was too busy waiting for people to get hit in the face with bricks and paint cans, is how carefully Home Alone structures itself. Rewatching it now, the pacing is honestly kind of impressive for a movie that could have easily turned into 90 minutes of repetitive slapstick. Because here's the thing, the trap sequence everybody remembers. That doesn't even fully kick in until the last section of the movie, and somehow the film still stays entertaining long before that. The opening stretch is basically organized chaos. The McAllister house feels loud, overcrowded, stressful, and alive. Everybody's interrupting each other, running around, packing bags, yelling about pizza and passports. The movie throws you directly into this frantic family energy almost immediately, and it does it fast enough that you barely have time to settle in before Kevin gets left behind. That early pacing matters because it creates momentum right away. A weaker version of this movie probably rushes straight into the burglars and the traps because that's the fun stuff. But Home Alone actually takes its time. It lets Kevin enjoy being alone first. The movie slows down enough for him to wander through the house, experiment with freedom, act like an adult, and slowly realize being alone isn't as exciting at night when the house gets quiet. That breathing room is important because it keeps the movie from becoming exhausting. There's also this constant layering happening underneath everything. While Kevin's adapting to being alone, the burglars are scouting houses in the background. Kevin's fear of the furnace gets introduced early. The Marley subplot quietly develops. Catherine O'Hara's journey home keeps cutting back in just enough to remind you there are emotional stakes beyond the comedy. The movie keeps moving, but it never feels rushed. And honestly, that's probably why the third act lands so hard. By the time Harry and Marv finally enter the house, the film has spent almost an hour building toward that moment. So when the chaos finally explodes, it feels earned instead of random. Every trap becomes funnier because the anticipation has been growing for so long. You know it's coming, the movie knows you know it's coming, and it keeps teasing the payoff until it finally unleashes complete insanity. And once it starts, the pacing of the finale is relentless. It's basically one escalating disaster after another. Every gag builds on the last one. There's almost this rhythm to the pain and reactions. Slip, scream, fall, recover, immediately get hit by something else. The movie barely gives Harry and Marv time to breathe, which weirdly makes the audience laugh harder because the suffering becomes so absurdly nonstop. Now, some people do think the movie peaks too hard in the final act. I actually understand that criticism a little. Once you've seen the traps a few times, certain middle sections can feel slower on repeat viewings, especially for adults who already know exactly where everything is heading. There are definitely viewers who feel the film is remembered mostly for its last 30 minutes. But honestly, I think the reason the finale became iconic is because the movie structures itself patiently beforehand. It earns the payoff. And even smaller pacing choices help. The movie knows when to switch tones. Right after a huge comedy sequence, it'll suddenly slow down for a quieter emotional scene with Kevin or Marley. Then it ramps the energy back up again before things get too sentimental. It constantly shifts between warmth, tension, and chaos without ever fully losing its identity. That balance is harder than it looks. Especially in family comedies, pacing can become a disaster really quickly. Either everything feels dragged out, or the movie becomes so frantic that none of the jokes land properly. Home Alone somehow avoids both problems most of the time. It keeps introducing little bits of comedy, emotion, suspense, or character moments just before the audience gets restless. And honestly, that's probably one of the biggest reasons the movie became endlessly rewatchable. Even when you know every trap by heart, the structure still pulls you through it naturally. The build-up, the release, the pauses, the chaos, it all flows in a way that feels surprisingly effortless for a movie about a child defending his suburban mansion like it's an action film. I honestly don't think Home Alone becomes a holiday classic without John Williams. Like, genuinely, the movie would still probably be funny, the traps would still work, Macaulay Culkin would still be memorable, but that feeling people associate with the movie. That warm, nostalgic Christmas feeling, a huge part of that comes from the music, because the score does so much more than just sit quietly in the background. The second those opening notes kick in, your brain immediately knows what kind of world you're entering. It's cozy, magical, slightly chaotic, emotional, playful, all at the same time. Williams somehow turns a movie about a forgotten child and two burglars getting violently destroyed into something that feels weirdly comforting. That's not normal, and what I love is how the soundtrack constantly shifts with the movie's mood without ever feeling disconnected. During the family chaos at the beginning, the music has this frantic energy to it, almost bouncing around the scenes while everybody's yelling and packing and running late. Then later, when Kevin is wandering around the house alone, the score suddenly becomes softer and more emotional, almost reminding you underneath all the comedy that this kid is actually lonely. Then the burglars show up and suddenly the music becomes mischievous, not threatening exactly, more like playful danger. The score treats Harry and Marv less like terrifying criminals and more like giant cartoon disasters waiting to happen. And honestly, that tone is a huge reason the violence never feels too dark. Williams keeps the movie floating in this magical Christmas atmosphere, even while people are getting smacked in the face with tools. That's kind of incredible when you think about it. And then there's Somewhere in My Memory. I mean, come on. That song alone basically feels like bottled up Christmas nostalgia. Even people who don't know the title instantly recognize it emotionally. It has this warm, almost bittersweet feeling to it that perfectly captures what the movie is really about underneath all the slapstick: family, loneliness, childhood, wanting to belong somewhere during the holidays. There's also something very old school about the soundtrack. It feels huge and orchestral in a way family movies rarely sound anymore. Modern Christmas comedies would probably overload everything with pop songs and ironic needle drops. Home Alone lets the score actually carry emotion and atmosphere, and because it's John Williams, every scene suddenly feels more cinematic than it probably has any right to. Even tiny moments get elevated. Kevin sledding down the stairs, walking through the snowy streets, setting up traps, decorating the tree. The music wraps around those scenes so perfectly that it becomes impossible to separate the visuals from the score in your memory. They basically fuse together in pop culture at this point. And honestly, I think that's why the movie feels so rewatchable every December. The soundtrack acts almost like emotional conditioning. The second you hear those choir vocals and orchestral swells, your brain immediately goes into holiday mode. Suddenly you want hot chocolate, snow outside the window, Christmas lights everywhere, even if it's not remotely winter where you live. That's the power of a really great film score. And Home Alone has one of those scores that quietly became part of Christmas itself without people even realizing it happened. One thing that really hit me rewatching Home Alone is how unbelievably cozy this movie looks. Like, this film practically invented the visual language of modern Christmas nostalgia. The second it starts, you already feel warm somehow. Even before anything funny happens, that McAllister house honestly deserves top billing at this point. Seriously, the house is so iconic that people remember the staircase, the kitchen, the front door, and the attic almost like they're actual characters from the movie. Everything about it feels exaggerated in the perfect movie way. Huge hallways, glowing lamps, giant Christmas trees, red wallpaper, warm wooden furniture, snow outside every window. It's basically the dream version of suburban Christmas living, and the production design knows exactly what emotional buttons it's pressing. There's red and green everywhere, but not in a tacky, overdecorated way. The movie constantly surrounds you with Christmas colors without making it feel artificial. The living room glows orange and gold. The snowy streets feel soft and magical instead of cold. Even the grocery store scenes somehow feel festive. It creates this heightened holiday reality that's more beautiful than real life but still feels familiar enough to connect with emotionally. That's a really difficult balance. A lot of Christmas movies either look too polished and fake or too ordinary to feel memorable. Home Alone sits right in the middle where everything feels slightly idealized, almost like a childhood memory. And honestly, I think that's why the visuals stick with people for decades. Even the way the movie uses space is clever. Early on, the house feels crowded and chaotic because the family fills every room with noise. Then once Kevin is alone, suddenly the same house starts feeling massive. Empty hallways, quiet staircases, big rooms with nobody in them. The production design subtly changes emotionally depending on Kevin's mood, which is something I never noticed when I was younger. Then once the burglars arrive, the house transforms again. Suddenly it becomes this giant playground of traps and danger. Stairs become weapons, door handles become hazards, ordinary household objects turn into tactical equipment. And because the layout of the house is so clearly established early on, you always understand where everybody is during the chaos. That's actually really important for comedy timing. The movie knows the audience understands the geography of the space, so every fall, chase, and trap hits harder because you know exactly what's coming. and honestly, the snow deserves appreciation too. The film uses winter atmosphere constantly without making it overwhelming. Snow-covered streets, icy sidewalks, Christmas lights glowing outside at night. It all adds to that feeling that the entire neighborhood exists inside this perfect holiday bubble. It's the kind of movie where even the cold somehow feels comforting. What I also love is that Home Alone still looks practical. Nothing feels digitally polished or artificial. The decorations, the props, the traps, the costumes, everything has texture. You can feel the weight of the ornaments, the icy steps, the dusty basement, the old furniture. That tactile quality gives the movie warmth modern family comedies sometimes struggle to recreate. And weirdly enough, even the exaggerated visual style helps sell the emotional side of the movie. Because beneath all the comedy, the house represents safety, family, and childhood comfort for Kevin. That's why protecting it matters emotionally, not just comedically. The production design quietly reinforces that idea in almost every scene without drawing attention to itself. Honestly, Home Alone doesn't just look like Christmas. It looks like the version of Christmas people remember in their heads years later, warmer, brighter, funnier, and a little more magical than it probably ever really was. Here's where Home Alone gets really interesting: the audience divide. Because let's be honest, this movie is one of those rare films that some people absolutely worship, while others can't stand it. On one side, you've got the fans, the ones who grew up with Kevin, the traps, the chaos, and that magical Christmas vibe. For them, it's more than a movie. It's nostalgia, comfort, and tradition all rolled into 90 minutes. They laugh at the slapstick, hum along to the John Williams score, and feel that warm, fuzzy holiday glow every time the McAllister house appears on screen. Even the cartoonish violence and ridiculous premise are part of the charm. It's playful, chaotic, and sentimental in exactly the right doses. Then you've got the critics and adults who didn't grow up with it or watched it with a more cynical eye. For them, Kevin can be insufferable, the family unrealistic, and the traps borderline cruel. The idea of an entire family forgetting an 8-year-old, absurd. The violence, over the top and maybe uncomfortable. To this group, the movie can feel like a gimmick, a bunch of gags glued together with minimal story substance, and maybe a little too sentimental to take seriously. What's fascinating is that both perspectives are valid. The movie doesn't try to appeal to everyone in the same way. It's deliberately heightened, cartoonish, and emotionally exaggerated. It asks viewers to suspend disbelief and lean into the fantasy of childhood chaos. Love it or hate it, that's what defines it. And honestly, I think that's part of its enduring appeal. The debate itself keeps the film alive. People who adored it as kids bring it to their families. People who disliked it end up forming strong opinions, and everyone talks about it at Christmas. That cultural discussion, the divided opinions, is a huge part of why Home Alone still matters more than 30 years later. In the end, whether you fall on the timeless classic side or the overrated slapstick side, you can't ignore the impact. The film has a personality that provokes reactions: laughter, annoyance, nostalgia, maybe even a little horror, and that's rare for a holiday movie. That divide is part of the charm, honestly. And for me, it's what makes revisiting it year after year so interesting. It's not just about Kevin or the traps, it's about how the movie makes you feel. Alright, let's talk sequels, because Home Alone didn't just stop at the original, it spawned a small empire, and that story is kind of all over the place. First up, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. This one keeps Macaulay Culkin, Pesci, and Stern, and honestly, it's a bit of a carbon copy of the first movie, same beats, same traps, same general formula, but some people actually prefer it. There's something fun about seeing Kevin lost in New York, and the setting change keeps the energy fresh enough that it feels like a new adventure, even if it's basically the original story on steroids. Still, a lot of reviewers note that it starts to show the cracks of repeating the same jokes too often. Then came Home Alone 3, which completely swapped out Culkin for Alex D. Lintz and the Wet Bandits for a group of international criminals with a microchip plot. It's an ambitious attempt to shake things up, but most agree it falls flat. The charm of the first two movies isn't there, the characters aren't as engaging, and the story doesn't hit the same emotional or comedic notes. It feels more like a Home Alone brand slapped onto a different movie, rather than a natural continuation of Kevin's adventures. And finally, Home Alone 4, which brings in a new cast again. Most people just don't talk about it fondly. The script is weak, the comedy is tired, and it's clear that the series is trying to rely on the reputation of the original rather than building anything new. Watching it, you can feel the magic draining away, the cleverness, the emotional warmth, the sheer chaos of the first film is gone. The sequels do underscore something important, though. Macaulay Culkin was absolutely central to what made the original work. take him out, or change the chemistry with Pesci and Stern, and the formula struggles. The later films highlight how rare the balance was in the first movie: humor, chaos, warmth, and character all in one. Without that, it's hard to recapture the original spark. Still, the sequels did cement the franchise's place in pop culture. Even if you don't like them, they prove that the world wanted more Kevin McAllister and more chaotic booby traps. And I think that desire says a lot about how much people loved the first movie. It created something that audiences wanted to revisit again and again, even if the later attempts didn't quite live up to the legend. It's honestly kind of wild to think about how deeply Home Alone embedded itself into pop culture, because this wasn't just a successful Christmas movie. It became the Christmas movie for an entire generation of people. And somehow, decades later, it still refuses to fade away. Like, even people who haven't properly watched the movie know the references. They know the scream with the aftershave. They know the paint can swinging down the staircase. They know "keep the change, you filthy animal." They know Catherine O'Hara yelling "Kevin" with pure panic in her voice. The movie basically turned ordinary little moments into permanent holiday imagery. And honestly, that doesn't happen by accident. Back in 1990, the film absolutely exploded. Huge box office success, huge cultural response, massive repeat viewings. It became one of those rare movies that instantly crossed over from popular film into family tradition territory. Parents watched it with kids, those kids grew up and showed it to their own kids, and suddenly Home Alone stopped belonging to one era. That's probably the most impressive part of its legacy. A lot of childhood classics only really work if you grew up at the exact right time, but Home Alone somehow keeps finding new audiences every generation. Kids still laugh at the traps. Adults still connect to the holiday warmth and nostalgia, and even people who think the movie is overrated still usually admit it left a huge cultural footprint. You can actually feel its influence everywhere too. So many family comedies after Home Alone tried copying the formula: mischievous kids, exaggerated slapstick, holiday settings, elaborate trap sequences, but very few captured the same balance. Because the original wasn't just successful due to one thing. It was the combination of Culkin, the score, the house, the Christmas atmosphere, the physical comedy, the emotional warmth. Everything hit at exactly the right moment. And Macaulay Culkin himself basically became the face of childhood in the early 90s because of this movie. That image of him with his hands on his face is permanently burned into entertainment history. It's one of those movie posters people recognize instantly, even if they haven't watched the film in years. The role turned him into a superstar almost overnight, and honestly, it's hard to separate Kevin McAllister from Culkin himself at this point. They became culturally fused together. What's interesting, though, is that Home Alone also survived because of repetition. TV reruns every Christmas, families replaying old VHS tapes, DVDs, streaming services. The movie became seasonal comfort food, not just entertainment, but ritual. There are people who genuinely feel like Christmas hasn't started properly until they've watched Home Alone at least once, and I kind of get it. There's something weirdly timeless about the movie's energy. Even though it's very rooted in late 80s and early 90s suburbia, it still taps into feelings that don't really age: childhood independence, family chaos, loneliness during the holidays, wanting connection, wanting freedom, wanting to feel safe at home. That emotional universality keeps the movie alive way more than nostalgia alone. And honestly, whether you personally think it's a masterpiece or an overrated kids' comedy, its legacy is impossible to deny. The movie became bigger than itself, bigger than its plot, bigger than its sequels, bigger than almost anyone probably expected when it first released. It became part of Christmas culture itself. And once a movie reaches that point, it stops being just a movie anymore.